What's good, everybody? It's your boy O'Shea Duke Jackson back at it again with another episode here. And guys, I have a great collaboration. When you see my brother on the right, it's the real deal. He needs no introductions, but in case for many of you who may not know who he is, I will let him describe who he is and what his channel is about.
What's good? Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Fresno State. I have my channel is where I pretty much do the Onyx Report, so Black masculinist information and worldview, and so Onyx Report right here on YouTube.
All right, guys, and give him a round of applause. I really appreciate the brother for coming on today to talk to us about a topic that is, very, very relatable to many of us from the Black community, especially those of us who came from divorced parents or had a mother that was single in the house and no father. And that is, are Black men, are we becoming son husbands, or in our later lives, husband sons? And this is not my idea. This is the great Dr. T. Hassan Johnson's idea. I think it's very relatable to you Black men out there. Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, why are we talking about this, and how does it relate to the Black male experience in America?
Well, it was something I noticed. I actually had a brother reach out to me, and he was talking about, he was married, and his wife is a six-figure earner, and he talked about her girlfriends that would come over and complain about their husbands. And as he would talk about it, one of the things he shared with me is they had to ask for an allowance from their wives just to go hang out and drink a beer. So I was just kind of asking him some more questions about it. And one of the things he revealed is that this group of six-figure earning women were all exclusively married to brothers who were ex-cons. And if anything, they were unemployed and to some extent homeless when they met. You know what I mean? And so now they're kind of house husbands, which there's nothing wrong with if that's what works for your relationship. But the problem was the women were actually complaining about the fact that they didn't have an income, complaining about the fact that they weren't the men that, that they've been idealizing since they were young. And yet these were the men that they chose, right? And so he was confused, and he reached out to me because he was asking me, why is this the case? And as I started to look into it, I realized it really wasn't a whole lot different than son husbands. So, we talk about son husbands as boys whose biological mothers kind of have them play husband roles in their lives, play roles that are really, inappropriate. And it doesn't have to get sexual, but unfortunately, there are times where it does. There's sexual violation in regard to that. But for the most part, when we talk about son husbands, these are biological offspring that are asked to play emotionally laborious roles for mothers that usually are reserved for men. With husband sons, one of the things I began to notice is that you had well-to-do women who were employed, who were educated, so on and so forth, and who would use the rationale that there were no other options, and they would choose men that were intentionally in such a low position that those men could not offer much challenge. So in other words, they were in the dominant position in the relationship. These men depended on them for hearth and home, for income, for food, for everything. And if there was so much as an argument, those men would be out on the street. So it really came down as to be a control measure, really. But whether you're talking about, especially if you're dealing with women that, decide at a certain point that they want to have children, they want to be married, so on and so forth, and they just chose somebody that they knew they could control. And part of the reason I've argued for this is, the average woman can't look up and say, you know what, I'm ready to get married. Let me go get O'Shea. I can get O'Shea anytime I want. Let me go get him. Is that likely? Not really. I mean, if you're talking about, and I don't want to go back into the whole Kevin Samuels high value man, but the central idea is still pretty similar. If you want the ideal that we've been hearing about from Black women since the 80s, that guy is not easy to get whenever you feel like getting. Kevin used to talk about picking a high value man off the high value tree. There is that perspective out there with a lot of women. But the problem is those men are not easy to control. You can't make them do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. So many choose men who are in a position where they can't really debate. They can't, they're vulnerable. And there are even situations where once she's had the child, even if they've gotten married, she'll get rid of him and do her own thing. He really doesn't have a much on his own. It is what it is. But I just posted a video not long ago showing a clip of a man who was getting cussed out by his lady because he was eating a meal and hadn't cooked her one. So she got out of bed and cussed him out because he hadn't done so and threatened to put him out, and he didn't have anywhere else to go. But these are the kind of dynamics we're talking about with husband sons. These are grown men who do not have the means on their own. And often in the beginning of the relationship, they didn't have means, and yet they're held accountable to standards that they've never met by women who are far more secure in their lifestyle, but actively choose men that are in vulnerable positions.
So let me kind of, deal. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. Let me deal with this because I've seen in our community many times, especially when you're coming up, like we did, and you're from the West Coast, right? Just like me.
Bay Area.
Okay. Bay Area. Okay. So the Bay Area was a little bit better, like Oakland's and San Francisco's, because there was a lot of blacks that came there to Oakland, especially in the sea and the chemicals. That time is a big industry there. So you had some professional, affluent blacks, and so it was kind of hard to deny that you didn't have black men that were not there. You had your legendary Third Baptist Church in San Francisco, it's very affluent. So there were black men that were doing very well and have been doing very well in the Bay Area for a long time. But you still would hear these black men are not out here. I can't find a man anywhere. Now, if you lived in Sacramento, which I did for part of my time of my life, it would make more sense. But now, when you deal with some of these cities, and you have some experience living in Philadelphia, Atlanta, DC, places like that, Baltimore. Well, we know that cannot be true. We just know that.
It isn't.
We can't. Memphis, Jackson, Mississippi. We know that you can't be true, but yet you would still hear that same tonality coming from black women. That I just can't find a good black man. But what was the reason that these black women were saying it, even though they were there at the Howard universities with these guys, the Clark Atlanta universities with these guys? You just Spelman, he's at Morris Crossing Street. There's plenty of black men there. So why are these women coming out and saying these things to justify their relationships with these guys who have nothing?
Well, you have a couple things. I mean, for one, when you talk about undergrad, college, for many, the way we were socialized in our community, settling down and getting married wasn't something that women even really were trained to do until at least their 30s. I mean, that was the idea. You get your career together first, and then you go find a husband, which is contrary to how a lot of other communities do it. But that's the way we prioritize education over coupling. So that's one dimension of it. So when she's in college with the kind of men, and this is something I see every day, when she's actually in college with the kind of men that you would think she would want to marry, she is interested. She is talking to him, but it's almost like putting guys on hold because at the end of the day, the rhetoric is she has to get her life together. She has to get her career set first. And by the time she'll approach a man about marriage, she may even have 2 or 3 kids while getting her career together and be in her mid 30s. And at that point, there's a lot of men that just don't even want to go there. So that's one issue that becomes a bit of a problem. The other, is the standard. And we've been talking about this for years. It's not that she can't find men. She can't find men that meets the standard. But one of the things that it's taken until the last 10 years for people to really start listening to, and it's been black men that's been saying it, is the problem is the standard itself. It's so elitist that you have, really, and this is something Kevin used to point out as well. You have the majority of women idealizing less than 10% of the men, right? The moment you start using language like 6 figures, you're automatically, I mean, it's like less than 10% make 6 figures across race and gender in America. So if that's going to be the language, you're already cutting out whole swaths of the population. Even if you say I will only date a man that's over 6'2", you've already eliminated over 90% of the population of men. I mean, it's an impossible standard, and the more you tack on to that, from size to status, all of those things limit. So then when you're dealing, because here's the thing, when you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistic data, black men, employed black men from 18 to 65 still out earn black women. So you really want to be with a black man, even one that earns a little more than you do, you can date at your level and you can still find that. The problem is the standard that they have is so ridiculously high that by the time they actually seriously entertain men that they're in close proximity to, that actually are their counterpart, they see those men as something to settle for, when in reality those are actually your partners. I mean, that's I would tell some of my students this: that guy you just dumped a year ago, that was your husband.
Right.
That was your husband. And so when I see
Right.
those kids, those young women 10, 15 years later, got a couple kids, still have never been married, still looking for this ideal dude. The guy she should have married has already moved on, and he's married, he's doing his thing, he's doing whatever. But I'm simply saying that was your window
Hmm.
right there. But you know, that framework
So
is like,
let me ask you this, because it seems like a timeline that you're taking us down is she had the opportunity with this particular guy.
mhm,
She's now dumped this guy. So the guy that she could get, she doesn't want.
right.
Now, let's say at 35, and I've seen some of the young ladies in my school, in my high school now. I graduated in 1989, and yeah, you go on Instagram, you're like, wow, things have really changed for that particular young lady,
Mhm,
and so now the guy that you used to be able to get, you can't even. He's no longer available.
right.
That guy has matured,
Right.
maybe even in some cases, I hate to say it, with a white woman.
Yeah. Well, that
Okay,
does happen. Yeah.
okay.
Um,
So let me just finish this real quick. So
mhm,
based on that, now we're at the point, because you see these ladies now, even in entertainment. Lizzo, you're seeing it even with some of the entertainers.
mhm,
Tandiwe Newton,
mhm,
Erica Badu.
mhm,
The 50 years old marrying a guy that's 27. So now I can't get 103,000 anymore. That's over and done with.
mhm.
Now, what I can get is a guy that's at least he can fuck me. You know what I mean? I hate to say it, but he at least can do that. Is that why we get to the transition to the son husbands or the husband sons? Because
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
go
No,
go
there
ahead,
that
Shane.
that is a dimension of it. Again, it's about control. It's about power. When you listed those celebrity women, how many of those young men are in a position to say no? That's not how we're going to do this. This is a better way that you don't really see it. They're in positions where even in the relationship, she's the decision maker. She's the one in the position of authority. And that's one of the reasons you find these young men eventually get outed for, infidelity on one level or another, whether they marry these older women or not, because they do have options. But at the end of the day, they're not in a position in those relationships where they can actually express themselves in a particular way. They are on the, she's in a position of authority. But the other
Mhm,
factor to that too is a lot of these women in powerful positions are trying to emulate what they see in powerful men. So the whole
mhm.
idea of going to get, because you notice these guys are always fairly attractive too, right? I mean, she's
Yeah.
going to get attractive men that are not as accomplished as she, that don't have comparable lifetime experience. They're in a
Mhm,
position where they will pretty much follow what she says, and
mhm,
they think that that's going to work. But the problem with that too is, the dynamics don't work that way. Nature doesn't work that way. A younger man might want kids. She's not going to be able to provide that at 50. It's not happening. So eventually, if he changes his mind, decides he wants kids, that's already a red flag there. She's already had several kids, right? He doesn't have comparable life experience. So, and I've seen this and I've experienced this as a young man dating older women. By the time he's in a position to take her to places and do things that he really wants to take a woman to, go enjoy, she's already done it. She's done it 10 times over. She's been with people that have
mhm,
taken her to far more. So that comparable life experience issue becomes a problem in and of itself, even there. But the notion of trying to get young, attractive men, this has been done before. This is the Terry McMillan, How Stella Got Her Groove Back method. And it didn't work in the
mhm,
90s. It's not working now because the
mhm,
dynamics aren't the same. You have feminists in particular that believe that because older men can get with younger women, they should be able to do the same. And they can. I mean, they can get younger men. The difference is younger men with older women, more often than not, it tends to be very sexual.
right.
And even though you can have some great conversation and some great relationships, there is a point where it just doesn't work at a certain point
Mhm,
in time. With
mhm,
older men, the difference in the dynamic is found in sexual marketplace value.
mhm,
Younger women do value the resources that men
mhm.
tend to have. So the relationship is one that you see all over the world, and it
Right.
tends to sustain itself, whether she's gold digging or whether she's actually looking to be a wife. Most women want security on one level or another: financial,
Mhm,
emotional, so on and so forth. All of those levels of security, it usually takes men longer to acquire. That
mhm,
dynamic doesn't work the same way with older women and younger men. Younger men have less value on the market overall. They don't really have much to bring. And this is one of the reasons that over time, that relationship becomes a husband-son relationship. If you ever dealt with a woman 10, 20 years older than you, and you're a young man who still hasn't accomplished, one of the first things you'll notice after a period of time is when you don't have comparable life experience or resources, that the relationship will diminish, the sex will begin to end, and you'll have conversations that sound very much like the conversations you have at home with your mother. Take the trash out. Why didn't you do this properly? So on and so on. You'll notice the parallels because the way women deal with men, they function, and this is, shout out to BGS. He's right about this. They function through the lens of their nest. And so they either see men as a resource, somebody they can depend on, or as someone they have to take care of. And if they have to take care of a grown man who's not their biological offspring, lose respect very quickly.
Let me ask you a question, because we've talked about these songs. Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I Don't Want No Scrubs. Okay.
Yep.
So these are the songs that some of these ladies have been singing for years. Now, Ain't Going On Rent, that was a little bit in the 80s, I believe. But I was there for I Don't Want No Scrubs. I was like 18 or 17 when that came out. So now, when these women were talking about these guys who are broke, destitute, now you call these guys hobosexuals is a name for them, the PlayStation Warriors, these guys like this. But I noticed a trend now. A lot of these women, when they are now in their later years, the goalpost is now shifted.
Okay.
How is the goalpost shifted? Because now for these young guys, they're getting praised for marrying them now. Let's look at Lizzo's new guy. His name is like Michael something like this, right? That guy is nowhere near Lizzo in accomplishments. Okay? And even though he's nowhere near, in the 90s, they would be telling her, "Girl, what are you talking about? He's not like you. You can do better than that. Like he don't deserve you. He's not even on your level." That was very popular back then. He not on your level. Lala Anthony, she's with the guy Da Vinci. In the BMF series with 50 Cent. He was only 27 years old. He's nowhere in accomplishment as compared to her. But now what you're seeing on popular blogs, Gossip, The Shade Room, they're praising these sort of relationships when 15 years earlier, that same guy, ain't nothing going on but the rent. I don't want no scrubs. So why are these older black women now? They're not saying the same things what these guys they're dealing with. Even Kim Kardashian, Pete Davidson, he ain't no bum or nothing, but he's nowhere near her.
Right.
So he might as well be a scrub.
Exactly.
Because the difference is so great. Why are they justifying these relationships now when just they were saying 20 years ago? And then going on with the rent.
Yeah. Because even though the rhetoric we have in society about age doesn't matter, suggesting that older women don't have the same options as younger women, you're not supposed to say those things. You're supposed to accept that, the age is a social construct as much as race is and all that. But we also know that there's a reality to it. So now that we see these older women, these older celebrities that are doing it, it's applauded. And you're absolutely right. 15 years ago, it would have been talked down about. But here's the thing, and I've been telling men this for the longest. The moment, if you really get hooked on the praise, don't be surprised when it goes away. If any of those men you mentioned decide they no longer want to be with these women or start pushing for divorce, right, and start pushing for alimony, so on and so forth, and we saw this happen with Adele, how do they then talk about those men? Right, those men become the worst thing. Sherry Shepherd had the same. Those men somehow become the worst thing in the world. And even though those men actually ask for the same thing women have always asked for when it comes to divorce, now there's something wrong with them. Right. So you'll notice how quickly all of that adoration will turn into hate the moment the relationship doesn't work out. And that's even if he doesn't go, if they're not married and getting a divorce and asking for, alimony, he'll still get hate in a certain regard. And when it comes to infidelity, to some extent, we even heard the same thing with Jason Momoa and, her name blanks. Lisa Bonet, thank you. We've heard about that even in those situations, that somehow it's these men's fault, but nobody wants to really pay attention to the fact that, the two men, a woman and a man are in different places. And if she's an older woman, he's a younger man, There are things that he's going to want on a regular basis that after a while she may not be interested in, and that relationship can get more and more strained. You know what I mean? It is what it is. I mean, we talk about men experiencing ED as they get older, right? Erectile dysfunction. We don't talk about vaginal, wall thinning, things of that nature, where older women just don't, even if they have the drive, that doesn't mean their body can necessarily do that. So it's okay to talk about men getting older and not being able to perform, but for some reason we never bring that up with women. And if he's a young, virile man and he's interested in having a healthy sex life, and you're dealing with a woman over 55 or over 50 for that matter, and this stuff hits women at different ages, but those are the factors that don't ever seem to come up, and it just becomes his fault. But these are there's a list of things that really kind of separate how younger men and older women get down, and over time it tends to be a problem. And again, most especially if he decides at a certain point, I think I do want kids, it becomes an issue. But there's something else you said about the no scrubs thing. And I remember even here at Fresno State, I put together a program, to really get more students, more Black students to come to Fresno, most particularly males. And we actually set it up to where we even had a kind of a retreat before the semester started to get the students acclimated to the campus. So here we had a collection of, I want to say, about 10 brothers that were finally there. And of course, we had a larger group of young Black women. And this was only a few years ago. At one morning during the retreat, they started playing No Scrubs, and all of the women, both the students, the faculty, and the staff, they all started singing No Scrubs together in unison. So you're talking 17-year-old to 60-year-old women dancing and singing No Scrubs in the same room, and they're all singing it to this group of 10 or so incoming freshmen. And one of the things I noticed is just across the looks on their faces, those men were checking out. And it's an interesting dynamic, because going back to what you said at the beginning of the program, those are actually the men these women need to be talking to about long-term relationships and marriage. Those are the ones. But they were alienating those men. And mind you, this is a retreat before the beginning of their freshman year. They were alienating those men even then. And those men witnessed older women, 30s, 40s through 60s, chiming in. And I'm saying, this is the dynamic right here. You're alienating the very men you're going to want to be married to 10 years from now, or longer. But either way, those men were checked out from that moment forward. And then they wondered why they wouldn't date them. There it is.
In a diverse state like California, I'm just going to be honest. If you're a Black man, you're doing fairly decent. If Black women ain't gonna talk to you, somebody gonna talk to you. That's the plain truth. That's the plain truth. You're doing something in California. You got the attitude in California as a woman. You better take that somewhere else. Look, I mean, it's the wrong place to be acting like. You've seen it.
Right. Look, all I'll tell you is in the last 14 years, Fresno became a majority Hispanic serving institution. I should tell you everything you're talking about.
Right.
I mean, here, if you see brothers with Latina women, it's not shocking. We're a small percentage of Fresno and Central California. It's majority Latino.
And brothers are not going to be sitting there taking that from, they're just not going to do it. It's just not going to do it. And it's interesting you said that, because I didn't really put it together like you said, because if you think about Megan Good, DeVon Franklin in his own right was successful.
Okay.
But can we not say he was not as successful as her?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So when he asked her to change her last name, you go in the shade room, she was like, they was calling him gay. This guy's a preacher. I mean, he never disrespected her publicly or nothing. Right. Oh, he's gay. What does she have his last name in the first place? Who is this nigga? And all this, it was really interesting. Not only with that, but the Mary J. Kendu Isaac situation. They was dragging Kendu Isaacs all down the road and stuff like that. And I noticed that these guys, even if they had something going on in their own professional life before they married them, women treated them as if DeVon Franklin was a nobody the whole entire time.
Yeah.
He might as well have been somebody in prison that just got out. According to them, like his accomplishments before that, and they treated that guy so bad. He never spoke publicly negatively, and that's the thing about Black women always talk about this, right? Oh, yeah, we only talk about black men because y'all disrespect us. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to say nothing about them for them to drag your ass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The black woman beehive machine.
Oh yeah.
You can be as professional.
Mm-hmm.
You can be as loving. Listen, you're Devon Franklin. Those women will come after you and call you. And if he could just read those comments in the shade room, I would love to see how he feels. He's been nothing but a class act with that woman, and
Mm-hmm.
those black women have tore his ass up.
Mm.
And it leads me to believe, when I think about it, it's like, well, then what's the use of marrying them in the first place with some guys, right? I mean, if you're, and I'm not talking about all black women. I mean, in case of like, let's say for example, you're a guy, you're dating somebody like Lizzo. Like
Mm.
you said, if you break up with them or they divorce,
Mm-hmm.
they gonna come after you.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem, though, and especially in the black community, is we're, as young men, we're acclimated to accepting substandard treatment. I don't have any other word for it, substandard treatment. And here's the thing. As black men begin to discover that they don't have to accept substandard treatment, that they can actually find environments where masculinity and manhood is valued, where their particular presentation of that is valued, it changes the dynamic entirely. And this is one of the issues with social media. It's one of the issues with the manosphere. As black men begin to compare notes and talk to each other about their experiences, it really changes the game. Because before social media, and I think you know about this, you've experienced this as well. You know, there were only certain spaces where black men could get together and even have dialogues. You know what I mean? But after the advent of social media, the development of the manosphere, now you have black men comparing notes. And if you find that you can now create a whole different standard of treatment that you can actually require in a relationship, that's something that we weren't really doing prior to that. I'll give you an example. In my classes, when I asked my I asked my male students, how many of you have been on a date where you were given a list of requirements in order to meet, in order to be worthy of this woman you're dating? I have yet to have one male that didn't raise his hand. They've all been told the list, you know, the earnings, the way they're supposed to look, how tall they're supposed to be, all of that. I asked my young ladies, how many of you have ever had a man have a list of requirements for you? I've yet to have one young lady raise her hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's a one-sided dynamic that we've seen since the 1980s. Men have not learned to say, I can require these things. That was something only women did. But as men started comparing notes and they're talking to men who are dating internationally, they're dating women from Africa, they're dating women from Britain, South America, you know, all these different places, and even interracially within the United States, they're coming back to the table and they're saying, yo, and this is a literal thing. I'm not even making this up. I've had men call me and tell me stories about, man, I used to have to argue for a glass of water. I used to have to argue to see if she was closer to the kitchen. I just asked because she was there, and it turned into
It's crazy.
And then, you know, and then they're talking about their experiences with other groups of women, and some of those women, and this had a lot to do with how those women are raised and the cultures they came out of. The very basic level of respect that those women demonstrated was, you know, mountains higher of what, you know, than higher than what these black men were familiar with. So just the different standards was attractive enough on its own. Where, and a lot of people kind of reframe that as, oh, these black men just want to emulate white men, or they just want to be oppressive, they just want to be patriarchal. A lot of it was, many of these black men just they wanted peace, and they wanted some modicum of respect and cooperation. It wasn't this big dynamic thing where you gotta, you know, I don't know, whatever these lists that people recreate it to be. But the average black man that I talk to just wants to be in a situation where it's not a war on a regular basis. And that's what I hear brothers saying. They're tired of having to fight wars in society, at the job, and then in the home. And that's the dynamic we're talking about. So when they started entertaining this different treatment from different women from around the world, and this doesn't exclude black women, there are black women from other countries, black women from all of these men were mainly talking about peace. You know, and I tell you, the first brother I know who did that, he called me. It was like a scene out of a Tyler Perry movie. He called me and he said, you know, I'm in this new relationship. I'm with a woman that I would have normally never chosen as a nationalist, right? He's calling me. He's saying, okay, I'm sitting here reading the book, and I look down. There's a glass of water that I didn't ask for. He keeps reading his book. He looks down. There's a cup of tea. He's reading his book. He looks down. There's a sandwich. And this was the thing, because he had been in the same, you know, similar kinds of relationships throughout his life, with black women that really didn't value him, his first instinct was to wait for the other shoe to drop. In other words, he called me like, yo, why is she doing this? What are her intentions? It never dawned on him that she was doing it because she actually wanted him to be comfortable and happy. It never dawned on him because he'd never experienced it before. And high performing, well-to-do, accomplished black male whose relationships, and he was married for 20 years. His relationships were battle after battle after battle. No matter what he did, he put them in houses, he bought them cars. The treatment was still ridiculously rude and disrespectful. When he finally decided to do something that he had always seen as against his values as a nationalist, all of a sudden the treatment was so good that he was like, I've never been happy before in a relationship. So what do I tell that brother to do?
Yeah, what can you? Yeah.
So I want
me and you are both in nationalist thinking, both of us. Yes. But we see the problem.
And here's the thing, nationalists understand it. Because and I've been saying this for years, and this was something I realized in the last 6 or 7 years when I really started having conversations with my brothers, and and I went to Temple and Afrocentric. A lot of these brothers were married to women from all over the continent, all over the Caribbean.
Yep.
Like, see, don't y'all, what this is. It doesn't have to be a white woman. That's the thing we always jump to. You guys just want white women. No, brothers want peace. They do want beauty, but they also want cooperation, and they will go wherever they have to find it.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and especially you see a lot of that happening also in certain, like you was in Philadelphia for some time. It's a big intercultural melting pot of blacks, right? A lot of Africans there.
Yes.
There's Little Africa. There's an African town in Philly, stuff like that. New York City.
Yes.
You Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Trinidadians. So, and also I want to bring up a point. Keisha Cole had a husband, son by the name of Nico Collett. He was like 19 years younger than she was.
Okay.
Soon as he left her, maybe we could put the picture up here. We can find it. He got a Latina woman.
Oh wow. Okay.
Soon as it, like, beautiful. And the reality is that for some of these guys who might be in those relationships, like you say, comparing notes and things like that, and as far as what you're seeing, as the world is diversifying with more employment opportunities, the world is much bigger now, or smaller rather, than what it was when we were coming up. Now we can have this conversation, and I'm in Europe, and you're in California, and money is exchanged and things like that. The more that these guys are going to do, the more in trouble these women are going to be.
Well, and it's also playing out in terms of the data. I mean, even black feminist sociologists have been writing about the fact that black men are some of the most amenable, some of the most progressive, even more so. There's some data sets that show that black men are more progressive about gender issues than many black women, because black men are not as closely tied to the church in the same way they used to be decades ago, and women tend to still be. So you'll find that data that supports the notion that black men tend to be the most progressive lovers as far as men are concerned, the most supportive. We've seen the data on black men being the most interactive fathers, even though they're not married. And here's the thing, and this is, again, something Kevin talked about. Other groups of women are starting to discover that. And contrary to popular belief, when they compare black men's attitudes about relationships and so on and so forth, compared to even their own men, black men are actually finding themselves being sought after in ways that even we're not prepared for.
Excellent point. Let me just say the shout out to Art Banaka. He's a YouTube channel here. He came to Poland. I met him. Came to my city because his wife is Polish.
Okay.
And she told me exactly what you said. I said, why did you marry Art? And he said, you know what? Art, in comparison to the men in my own community, he was more loving. He was more supportive.
Yep.
He didn't want to keep me in the box and be so controlling of me. And he asked me, I have more input into the relationship in comparison to my own societal norms.
Sure.
And when you look at that, and now that you said that, when you even go to Africa, no offense to African men, but it's more patriarchal there for sure. And the women are a little bit more tied down. And so if they want to have a man that's a little bit more easygoing, liberal, things like that, That's why black men are getting married so easily in
Mhm.
these places because they're more understanding. Well, baby,
Yeah,
well, you go ahead.
no, I'm in agreement. Look, the average black man wants very little. And thing about it is, you know, again, going back to the colleague of mine who's had this experience where he was, you know, he was brought water and tea and so on and so forth. One of the things he and I used to talk about was you know, when he first got with the woman he eventually married, you know, who was not, you know, African American, right? But when he got with her and he was talking to her about it, when he laid out what he wanted in a relationship, he said, you know, she took a couple days to ponder if she could play that role. And one of the things she said to him when she came back in and they had a sit down, she said, one of the things I realize is what you're asking for is not even the base minimum of what I was trained to give men from my own community.
Oh my God.
It wasn't even the base minimum. So she was like, so you're going to, you know, you're going to take care of these responsibilities. You're going to provide for me in this way. You're going to do X, Y, and Z. And all I have to do, I mean, she went through his list. He wrote it out. He explained it to her, but he didn't know that the list he wrote that took him 30 years to even conceptualize and write down, because we don't do that. Many of us,
Mm-hmm.
that list that took him 30 years to come up with, she was like, this isn't even the base level of what I was taught to give the men in my community. So for her to give him more than he asked for was still not a challenge. And his mind is blown. And this is one of the things we've really got to talk about at some point. The stereotype, especially in social media, is that what black men want is so oppressive and ridiculous that, you know, but really the everyday brother, the ones who reach out to me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong in terms of the brothers that reach out to you, they're not
Mm-hmm.
actually asking for some crazy list of, you know, walk 10 paces behind me and you know, drop rose petals at my feet. They're not asking for anything like really what they're asking for is, can we actually not have an argument every other day? You know, it's really basic level. Can we communicate like you actually respect me as a human being? Can we talk in a way that doesn't require that I gotta, you know, at every turn, you know, really be checking my own anger because of the way you're talking at me? I mean, I've done some recent shows showing you videos on how some of these guys are treated, and they're not violent. These guys are not all bums, they're not all homeless, they're not all whatever. They're actually, many of them are upstanding men. Look, I've got brothers who are homeless with a smartphone who participate in social media, all the way to brothers who run universities and run banks. And they are telling me the same stories, whether they are making no money or whether they are making $500,000 a year. They are
Mm-hmm.
telling me the same stories about being treated with
Mm-hmm.
less respect than somebody that this woman has never met before. And these are the things that black men are starting to say we don't want anymore. There needs to be a basic modicum. And I even hear brothers say, well, if you know, if you want to be respected, you got to, you know, you got to buy her things, you got to provide for her. That's not what we're talking about. There's a base level of respect that you communicate with people on, and then there's levels of respect that should be, you know, metered based on what how you guys engage each other. Black men are complaining that the base level isn't even being met, and we've become so acclimated to it growing up in female dominated spaces that we accept it. But when we start to find out that we don't have to,
Mm-hmm.
that's when the game changes.
Especially the fact that because I'm in other parts of the world all the time, and you and even my own grandfather, I make this claim all the time. My grandfather was born in 1918,
Okay.
and my grandfather was baptized in 1949
Hmm.
at the Macedonia Baptist Church in North Richmond. It's still there now.
Okay.
So I remember that date because that date is important for me because my mom was born not too shortly after that.
Hmm.
But my grandfather had a third or second grade education,
Hmm.
and the respect that my grandfather got
Yeah.
from women in 1949,
Hmm.
as a brother that went to undergrad, medical school,
Hmm.
top 5% earner,
Hmm.
I don't even have a tenth of that respect that he had
Yeah, exactly.
with a third grade education in. I have to fight for it.
Yes. I had a woman reach out to me last week. She
Yep.
reached out to me on social media because she saw some of my videos and she said, look, I don't understand what's going on with black men. I don't understand it. And I had a few minutes. I had a few minutes on my hands. I said, you know what? I'll do for you what I don't rarely do. I said, we'll have a conversation. So we, exchange information. We got on the phone, and within an hour, I had to tell this woman to stop yelling, to quiet down, to be respectful. And I said I had to remind her she actually called me to ask my insight on things and began to get, started to yell and so on and so forth at the responses she was given. But here's the thing. My point is in raising that, you called me to ask me questions about black men, and I have to tell you to stop yelling and being disrespectful at different points. At other points, she was lovely. The conversation was great. But I shouldn't have to tell a perfect stranger. Now, if that's happening to a perfect stranger that's asking me my insight for her betterment, what's happening to average men in relationships with women they're meeting? And that's the point I'm getting at. If you can't get a certain modicum of respect from someone who's asking a favor of you that you don't even know, what happens when you're talking about being with and or marrying someone who's raised in the same cultural milieu that frames black men as lesser beings? And that's the fundamental part of this that nobody wants to admit to. Black men are raised in our community to be seen as objects, as tools, but fundamentally lesser beings than our women.
That is so true. And it's sad that, I mean, think about it, you guys, in other communities, a PhD, like in the black world, that is, listen, people who get professional degrees and PhD degrees, come on, this is the top 10% of our people.
Mm-hmm.
And you're yelling at somebody like that.
Oh man, don't even.
You can't even contact in other communities. A PhD, what? Talk to you? Who are you? Are you serious? Call me? Who do you think you are? You get the opportunity to do it. And again, you got to say it's not all. But one of the things I have noticed, I always thought that my earning potential, my degree, would help me out in interactions with people in the community as they see me. Right. And I understand that it doesn't. It means nothing. Mm-hmm. A lot of boundaries have to be set.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh no, I have a list of brothers who've not only been maligned publicly, lost their positions as professors over everything from false accusations to vengeful calls to their campuses, their departments, simply on the basis of her being mad. I got brothers who own their own businesses who used to be in prison 20 years ago, right? Who are now upstanding. They've accomplished. They pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. And I told this story before. This happened a couple of years ago to a young man that reached out to me. His girl put him in jail one night because he came home late from work. She assumed he was cheating, and because he had a record, even though he had been out of prison for like 20 years, she falsely accused him of abuse just to get him arrested because she was mad that he came home late. This is the kind of dynamic we're talking about, where accomplishments, be they degrees or business acumen, still doesn't garner you a certain level of respect. And that worked against her interests, but she was still willing to do it. Out of pure spite.
Well, brothers, I mean, Doc, this is another great collab. Brothers have been, asking for you to come back. I know we've been doing these at least once a month, maybe quite frequently. And I definitely appreciate, nobody breaks these issues down like you. Now, I know there's another brother out there, Dr. Ronald Neal. So Doc, if you're watching, I don't know if you're going to be as good as this.
Oh, no, Doc is crazy. He'll do it.
Because TSN is a gold standard. But when you come on this platform, you're going to have to bring it, all right? So I need you to get your weight. I need you to get your protein and get your weight up. Because Dr. TSN Johnson, you said I thought I was smart. You start hearing the words like ubiquitous, and you can actually spell it. You know what I mean? Undergird. So these are SAT words you're dealing with over here. So y'all got to watch it back. But Doc, tell them why they need to subscribe to your channel, brother.
Well, first, that's the mad professor. He's gonna do his thing. Shout out to Dr. Neal. Y'all go check out Dr. Ronald Neal's channel on YouTube. And again, I want to thank O'Shea for inviting me on. Very gracious. He doesn't have to do it. He grinds day and night. This brother be up till 5 a.m. making videos. So when he reaches out to me, I'm nothing but appreciative. But check out the Onyx Report here on YouTube. Support the channel. I have the Institute for Black Male Studies. You can go to instituteforblackmalestudies.com. You can watch content there. You can become a channel supporter there as well through Patreon, and check out some of the things, even the merchandise. Some of the merchandise they have available No, you can't see that, but Institute for Black Male Studies. But support, because you're not going to get this content from anyone else. This is Black
Nobody.
male created content, and if you want to see more of it, y'all got to support it. That's the bottom line to it. Because whether it's other groups of people, whether it's Black women, they support the content they want
Yep.
more of.
Right.
And if you want more Black male content, you got to support it.
Yep. Y'all know y'all got to give me your money. We ain't gonna play that shit. But go to them, put his stuff there in the content. Go buy his shirts. You guys know that he's doing. We don't have many people that's doing what he's doing, and I want to bring awareness to Dr. C.S. John Johnson. He's doing the yeoman's job. Hopefully, in the next few years, we will get him a corrupt Maybach for all the work he's done in the community. Because we niggas over here, so we're gonna have some corruption going on. So that's just, y'all understand that. It's just how it works. But I do appreciate our brother for coming over here, and subscribe to his channel, hit the bell, let him know I sent you. And as you know, we out. Peace.